Good morning, good morning, good morning. Welcome to Flint. Welcome to the 2026 IHP Summit here on the U of M Flint campus. My name is Dr. Lisa Lapeyrouse, and I am one of the MCs today. I am also an associate professor in the Department of Public Health and Health Sciences. But more pertinent to why I'm up here today is I am the director of research for the Inclusive History Project for our campus at U of M Flint. And my co-host today is my good friend, my community partner, Patrick McNeil.
All right. Good morning, everyone. How y'all doing? All right, so my name is Patrick McNeil, and I'm honored to serve as one of your MCs for today. The Inclusive History Project here at the University of Michigan-Flint campus is more than just remembering the past. It's about recognizing the full story of our community, lifting up voices that have for too often long gone unheard, and creating space for truth, reflection, and connection. Inclusive history means that every story matters. Your story matters. Let me just say that one more time, y'all. Every story matters. Your story matters. It means acknowledging the experiences, contributions, and resilience of all people across generations, cultures, and communities. When we take the time to listen and learn from one another, we begin to build a more complete understanding of who we are and how we could and should move forward. As we begin, I invite each of you to enter into this engagement with an open mind and an open heart. Let this be a space where we can acknowledge the past, celebrate the present, and imagine a future shaped by inclusion, equity, and shared understanding that we are a better community when we are a connected community. I'm reminded that during this time, one of my favorite people just went home to be with the ancestors. And one of the things that he would say that always made me proud was this. He would say, I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody. I may be on welfare, but I am somebody. I may be uneducated, but I am somebody. I must be. I'm God's child. I must be respected and protected. I am black and I am beautiful. I am somebody. Soul power. All right, so we're thrilled to have you here today as we share our work and our stories, engaging in conversation about the work. With that being said, I'm gonna get out the way and I'm gonna let Dr. Lisa give us a land acknowledgement.
We would like to acknowledge that the land that we are meeting on today is ancestral, traditional, and contemporary homeland of many indigenous nations, most recently the Anishinaabe, including the Potawatomi, Chippewa, Ojibwa, and Odawa tribal nations. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide, forced relocation, and removal of many from this territory. We honor and we respect the many indigenous people, including those from the Three Fire Alliance, who are still connected to this land on which we gather. Thank you. DJ, do you have some MC Breed for me? Some MC Breed? Some of you may know this song, some of you may not. This is the first fact for today. MC Breed is from Flint. Yes. Thank you. All right, so hopefully this gives you some appetite for today. We're gonna have fun today. You know, I'm not a historian, but I love the IHP, and I want everybody to know that you don't have to be a historian. This stuff is relevant to all of us. So now, I'm very pleased to introduce Chancellor Lawrence Alexander. Dr. Alexander is our new chancellor. Well, I mean, he's been here a little while, but we still consider him new at the University of Michigan-Flint. He joined the university in 2024. He has more than 3 decades of experience at the university as a university leader, academic administrator, and professor. Prior to joining U of M Flint, he served for 11 years as chancellor of the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, and he also served 22 years as a professor and administrator at the University of Florida. He earned a bachelor's degree from the University of New Orleans, a master's degree from the University of Florida, and a doctorate degree from Tulane University, and a PhD, so double doctor there, from Florida State University. He is a member of the board of the Michigan Association of State Universities, the Flint Genesee Group, and the Uptown Reinvestment Corporation. He was also appointed last year by Governor Gretchen Whitmer, Big Gretch, to the Michigan Education Trust Board, which oversees prepaid tuition savings program. Please join me in giving him a warm welcome.
Good morning, everyone. So happy to be here, and one thing I did miss in coming up here was my walk-up music. Mr. DJ, it seems that you were you were hitting it on the ones and the twos a minute ago, but I'll take that. To the co-chairs of the Inclusive History Project, Elizabeth Cole and Earl Lewis, the members of the project team, faculty, staff, students, and partners. Welcome to Flint, Michigan. And on behalf of the University of Michigan-Flint, it is my honor to welcome you to this university's campus and to the 2026 summit of the University of Michigan Inclusive History Project. We come together today with a shared purpose, to better understand our past so that we can more intentionally shape our future. Inclusive History Project reflects a commitment across the University of Michigan to examine our history with honesty, depth, and courage, recognizing not only achievements, but also the experiences and the voices and perspectives that have too often been overlooked or underrepresented. Here at U of M Flint, that commitment is deeply aligned with who we are. Our campus is rooted in a community defined by resilience, diversity, and a strong sense of place. We know that telling a fuller story, a more inclusive story, is not simply about looking backward. It is about creating a stronger, more equitable path forward for our students and our institution and the communities that we serve. More than a year ago, we hosted a project exhibit for Inclusive History. It was called In Search of Memories, Exploring the Archival Gaps Between Yesterday, Today, and Tomorrow. It was a great event, bringing together scholars and students and community members to share previously undocumented campus history and to ponder those stories that have yet to be told, but have all been or will be shaped by the lived experiences. This kind of work asks something of all of us. It asks us to listen openly, respectfully. It asks us to engage with complexity even when it's uncomfortable, and it asks us to recognize that inclusive history is not a finished product, but an ongoing process. that evolves as we continue to learn and grow together. So I'm grateful to the faculty, the staff, the students, and the partners who are contributing their time and their talent and their scholarship and insight to this important effort. Your work helps to ensure that the University of Michigan's story reflects the richness and diversity of all who have been a part of it. So thank you for being here and for your commitment to this meaningful endeavor. I commend you, all of you, involved in the Inclusive History Project for the great work that you're doing through collaboration and engagement and outreach across the 3 campuses, Michigan Medicine, and beyond. We are honored to travel with you on this journey. So it is now my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Cole, but I do wish you a most pleasurable visit here, and if there's anything that I could do to help make this visit more comfortable or more pleasurable for you, please do not hesitate to let me or a member of our great staff know about it. I appreciate you being here. Welcome once again. Enjoy your time here at U of M Flint. Go Flint and go Blue. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name's Liz Cole, and I am University Diversity and Social Transformation Professor of Psychology and Women's and Gender Studies on the Ann Arbor campus, where I am also Director of the Philip J. Bowman Center for Scholarship to Practice. And as one of the co-chairs of the Inclusive History Project, it is my very great honor to welcome you today to the 2026 Summit. We are just thrilled to be hosting this year at the U of M Flint campus. I think you've heard a little bit about the IHP today, but I'll give you maybe a more complete background. The IHP is a university-wide, multi-year presidential initiative to honestly and critically re-examine the University of Michigan's full past, stretching across the university's campuses at Flint, Dearborn, Ann Arbor, and also Michigan Medicine. Our work includes research to examine received histories and to center heretofore ignored stories. We aim to engage people across campuses and communities, the communities beyond our campuses, to learn about and learn from the university's history. We're pursuing these research and engagement efforts to more deeply understand the continuing impact of the university's history on our present, so that our work will lead to action to change U of M's future. That's really critical. This is not an academic exercise. We're here to think about the past in order to guide the way to a more inclusive future. Every year, the summit gathers us together so that we can look across all of the IHP's many research efforts to research, engage, and repair. And I'll tell you that over the past year, I have often thought about last year's summit, which took place at U of M Dearborn early in April, because in a very difficult year, it was a high point for me. Last winter saw many challenges to the work that the IHP pursues and to the values that underlie that work. And if you're here today, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. And of course, these challenges do continue. But so does our collective work. And opportunities like this one to come together, to be in dialogue, and to review what we've accomplished and refine what we're working toward are still critical in this time. And to be honest, that feeling of elation and inspiration that I felt last year is one that I regularly experience at IHP events. Working on this project has been one of my highlights in a 30-year career, and I expect today will be no different. So we have a full day, and I want to tell you a little bit about what's going to come. This morning, we're going to have 2 panel discussions. The first is called Whose History, Whose University? Power, Memory, and Narrative. And in that panel, you will get a chance to hear from our IHP research directors on the 3 campuses, and it will be moderated by our IHP co-chair, Earl Lewis. And we'll get started on that in just a minute. Later this morning, we'll have a second panel called Geographies of Justice and the Changing City. It will explore the history and the impact of urban renewal in Flint and its connection to U of M Flint's move to its downtown campus. We also have great exhibits going on throughout the day, and I hope you'll take some time to visit them. One of them is called Blueprints of Power, the University and Urban Renewal in Flint, and it's on view right outside this auditorium. Today, it's been here for a while, but today is the last day. It will be here at USEN, so please find some time to walk through that exhibit and give it some thought today. This afternoon, we'll have a series of lightning talks. We'll hear from a range of students, community members, faculty, and staff about their work on central IHP project sites and on projects that we funded through our IHP Research and Engagement Fund. One of the things that's so exciting about this project, I think, is just its breadth. So we currently have 12 central research project sites, and we've made almost 90 grants for research, engagement, and teaching about U of M's inclusive history. So obviously we can't cover all of that today, but these talks will give you a sense of the energy and the dedication that animates these projects and what we're learning from them. I think you're already getting a taste that the kind of work we're doing here requires coalition and collaboration. So I'm really excited that we've set up the day to offer many opportunities to engage, connect, and share ideas. I hope you will visit the community tabling fair that's taking place in the middle of the day, or you might choose to join a guided history of U of M Flint Student Support Service Centers, and that tour will start at 1 p.m. There will also be opportunities to make buttons with artists from Flint and to share your story about U of M in the Wolverine Stories video booth. You will also get a chance to participate in an interactive photo mural that was conceptualized and led by our IHP Student Advisory Committee, which includes students drawn from all 3 campuses. I also want to particularly encourage you to stop by the Shape of Repair interactive installation happening in the Happenings Room. And that's also the place where you can visit to get food and refreshments. This installation invites you to share your ideas about what kind of reparative outcomes the IHP should be working toward. It asks you to consider and share with us an important question. What does repair require? We are really eager to hear your responses because that will help us to shape and envision our future work. Now, just to situate you in time in where this summit today takes place, we are now in year 3 of the IHP, which is a 5-year project. So we are at the midway point of our 5-year phase. We're truly in the middle of this project. So that means we've done a lot and we have a lot to share with you, but it also means that there's still a lot more work to do. We see this point, this middle point in 2026, offering an opportunity not only to share these findings, which I suspect you're really eager to hear about, but also to ask more questions and to hear from you your answers. Questions like, what's your story? And what does belonging look like to you? And as I said earlier, what will it require to repair the harms of the past? Today's not only a chance to share and celebrate what we've done so far, but it's also a chance to ask and to explore what comes next. And it's not only a chance for us to share these findings, but it's also a chance for us to expand our community. To do this kind of work, this inclusive history work, requires community and coalition. And we're not only talking about the university communities that are drawn from our campuses, we're also trying to think about a more expansive and inclusive vision of community that includes the local communities that our campuses belong to. So we're especially glad today to highlight the work that's being done in partnership with a variety of these communities at each of our campuses and to offer you opportunities to engage and form new connections. As I said, IHP events often inspire me because of the chance to see and experience our collective work and to witness the commitment and creativity and collaboration that drives it. And we are so excited to have you here to share it with us. So with that being said, I'm looking forward to getting our real program started. And to do so, I am proud to welcome my IHP co-chair, Earl Lewis, to the podium. Earl is the founding director of the Center for Social Solutions, and he's also the Thomas C. Holt Distinguished University Professor of History, Afro-American and African Studies, and Public Policy at U of M Ann Arbor. Welcome, Earl, and welcome to our panel.
Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
There we go. Always make sure we're awake. There's something about those early mornings and where the brain cells are still activating. Liz, thank you. As Liz has noted, we are in the middle of our work as a project, meaning that we are halfway through a 5-year timeline and that we are immersed in that work. We've begun work, but we're also pursuing work. And we're here today to really share some sense of the progress that has been made and to really probe the question and questions of whose history, whose university. And I'm pleased to have the opportunity to do so in conversation and dialogue with the IHP faculty research directors, who will reflect on the work they have been doing on each of our campuses. Our panelists this morning consist of Lisa Lapeyrouse, who you've already met, who's an associate professor of health sciences and administration and the IHP research director here on the Flint campus. Jay Cook, professor of history and the IHP research director on the Ann Arbor campus, and Cam Amin, professor of Middle East and Iranian diaspora studies and the IHP research director on the Dearborn campus. Each research director will make a brief presentation that offers both a real sense of the work that's underway and planned on their campuses and provide some example of the nature of the engagement. They also will reflect in part on how some of that work has begun to address the question of repair. After each of these presentations, we will have a chance for the 4 of us to actually gather in conversation and talk about how we think about the IHP moving beyond traditional origin stories. What's really the focus of these university history projects? What lessons have we already learned? What lessons do we imagine we will still learn? And to get us started, I'd like to invite Lisa back up to the podium to give us a sense of events on the Flint campus.
So as already been shared, we are in our 3rd year. I was hired in October, so I'm like, I'm not even a full 3 years. So I was hired last. And why I'm bringing that up is I'm incredibly competitive. So when you see what we've been building, you know, remember, not quite 3 years yet. So this is just kind of a summary of the images that I'll be showing you. Well, first of all, when I thought about undertaking this work, I was actually not really sure how I would fit into the IHP. I had been contacted and had a couple of conversations, and my work is community engaged. And something that really interested me about the Inclusive History Project was the fact that it was going to be community engaged. It was going to look at whose voices have been forgotten, excluded. As a first-generation college student, as somebody from an ethnic minority community, these things spoke to me both personally and professionally. But before I agreed to this position, I said, because they talked about research, engagement, and repair. And I said, do you have money for the repair now? Because I didn't want to be in yet another situation as a researcher where we identify the problem and then are left scrambling, trying to find the resources to implement something. And they said, oh no, like we don't have to wait till year 5 until we can begin implementing change. So that perked my interest, and I was like, wait a minute, what? You have money now? So long story short, I was hired into the position, and it's been the best professional choice that I've made. It's been really, really great, and I'm so happy to be able to share some of the stuff we've built on our U of M Flint campus. So as a community engaged scholar, I started with building a community advisory board. I knew that to tell a comprehensive history, we were gonna need to talk to the people who not only work here, but live in our community, who have experiences with the university in formal and informal ways. And so it's very important to meet in community, so you'll see pictures where we're actually not necessarily meeting on campus, but in places within the city, putting resources locally. These are the current student members of the U of M Flint campus that are part of the Student Advisory Board. This is one of our first really big things that we were able to accomplish was in 2024. We had a big exposition, and like I said, I'm not a historian, and so I've really had to learn a lot and visit the archives, know where the archives are, and one of the things that we were interested in is learning more about student life. And we found out that student life, there were like these boxes and boxes of like photos and just different things, but they weren't organized, and they didn't have what I now know is called metadata to tell us, what are we looking at? Who are these people? Why was this photographed? Why was this significant? And so from that, an idea was born to figure, like, let's take some of these pictures and let's crowdsource it. Let's put these pictures up and see if people can help us identify this information. And so from that, we built this exposition, and we were able to actually identify quite a few of the photos, and it was great for people who were much too young to remember people in the pictures to see, you know, the different kind of hair and clothes and everything that made U of M Flint its past. During that time, this was in conjunction with homecoming, we also wanted to make sure that we're engaging lots of different audiences, and so we had a student organization poster competition, and we really, you know, want to make sure that people know that history is for all of us, and so we gave them the opportunity to explore what are their origin stories on this campus. Why did they come to exist? What circumstances contributed to that? What has been their major milestones, so that, you know, we could celebrate that and people have an understanding of what their history is. Again, our work is meant to be not only helpful for moving our university forward, but also providing service to our local community. This is a photo of students that were part of an IHP course, and they were looking at the offering of multilingual courses. They also looked at some statements that were in our catalog, and were able to make some institutional change, but they knew that this was going to be relevant to our local community, and so they presented at the Latinx Technology and Community Center. Also, to kind of provide support to the different projects that we have going on, we have show and tell sessions. So people present their works in progress, able to share methods and receive feedback to, again, bump up the rigor of the things that we're doing. This was at the Gloria Coles Flint Public Library. And then on December 2nd, we had a showcase for the SSSC, which I'll be talking about in a little while. And we also have the Blueprints of Power, which is right upstairs that we've worked a really long time on. And then, so if you go into the gallery, which is right in the lobby, you'll be able to learn about the Flint Spokesman, which is a historically African-American newspaper that was really important to sharing information about urban renewal. We also have the 1956 project, which is looking at the first graduates of U of M Flint. And if you didn't know, there'll be a presentation on this later, but as a tidbit, our first valedictorian, which will probably surprise many of you, was a Japanese woman. So stay tuned. Okay, and then the SSSC project. This is our sites project where we're looking at 5 different student support service centers on our campus. And I've been here since 2012, so coming up close to 15 years, and there's been a lot of changes that happened during that time, and I really wanted to understand, why did these centers exist? What were their missions? What were their visions? And how did that change over time, especially with things like, we had continuous challenges with enrollment. And so I'll be happy to share more about that during the panel discussion, but also during the tour, you can talk to each one of those centers. Thank you. So now I'd like to invite up my equivalent on the Ann Arbor campus, Dr. Jay Cook.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Jay Cook, and I'm the Director of Research for the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. As you know, this is not an easy time to do this sort of work in the midst of sweeping attacks on higher ed, budget austerity, defunding of the humanities, and political nervousness about pursuing almost anything involved with academic diversity work. So I want to begin by just offering a sincere thank you to everyone here for supporting us and being a part of our larger efforts. My own remarks are going to follow a somewhat different script because the Ann Arbor IHP is a pretty big and baggy operation. We currently have 8 different projects up and running on a wide range of topics. And as I was prepping for this panel, I quickly realized it was going to be tough to try and bullet point everything going on in these many projects in 8 short minutes. So instead, I'm going to talk briefly about the IHP's own origin story, detail some of the important choices that we've made, and then tell you about 1 or 2 of the Ann Arbor projects as time allows in a bit more detail. So, a series of false starts. Some of you know the IHP was first imagined in the difficult summer of 2020 and began its life as a large university-wide initiative through the U of M President's Office. Thus far, we have navigated no less than 4 separate presidential transitions during the short life cycle of the IHP. And yet, despite this flux and upheaval, here we are today, roughly 2.5 years into the IHP's initial 5-year pilot, close to 100 strong across all 3 campuses, and more than a dozen major project sites launched and thriving, with 3 more currently in development. Somehow, in the course of 2.5 years, we've managed to build what is now the largest and most ambitious institutional history and public engagement project in the United States. Yeah. It's not easy to do, and it's largely, I think, through Liz and Earl's leadership and many collaborators and colleagues across all 3 campuses that we've been able to do that. Whereas most of our peer institutions have retreated from this sort of work, the IHP has chosen to range widely across 200+ years of U of M's history, many different communities and contexts, and much of the wider world. As my friend and colleague on our 1817 project, Michael Witkin, has noted, the IHP really chose to lean into this work at a moment when many universities and colleges were retreating or going silent on these questions. But that said, I also want to think about how we got here. My own experience with the IHP began as a faculty member on the 3-campus framing committee in 2022-2023. This committee, led by Liz and Earl, met on a monthly basis, and it included faculty, staff, students, administrators, and community partners across all 3 campuses. The very first choice this committee made, and one which has arguably mattered most of all, was to build the IHP itself as a 3-campus partnership, something that has not happened nearly enough in U of M's longer history. So what else was interesting in this initial blueprint? As you can see, the committee came up with this larger model to create a kind of 3 foundations of IHP work: research, engagement, and repair. And the report called for a broad set of rubrics for future IHP project sites, what we refer to as the 4 frames of IHP work. Broadly speaking, this was not a prescription from on high to focus on this or that group or this or that story, but rather a powerful conceptual framework for all of us to think broadly and capaciously about U of M's institutional history over the past 200 years. In some respects, I think it's fair to say that U of M was a little slow in coming to this work. Brown University and its visionary president, Ruth Simmons, for example, launched its landmark Slavery and Justice program 17 years earlier in 2006. And over the next 16 years, there have been some very important programs at other universities and colleges that were important models for us. For example, South Dakota State's Wakini Institute or the University of Minnesota Truth Project, both of which have done really interesting and innovative work on Native American land dispossession. But once the IHP got rolling in 2023, we've been more ambitious and built something larger and arguably more innovative than most of our peers. On the Ann Arbor campus, we built 6 major project sites and 2 affiliate projects in the first 2.5 years. And I really want to draw your attention to the range of and diversity of these projects. We have projects on the history of U of M athletics, community archives projects working on how to collaborate with communities on shared stewardship of collections. We have projects on Native American, African American, Asian American, and Jewish American history. It's not just local histories in southeastern Michigan either. For example, our Reconnect, Recollect project team will be making their 4th trip to the Philippines this summer to conduct research and build community partnerships with the descendants of Filipino communities, out of which U of M researchers took ethnographies, texts, and artifacts in the context of US colonialism in the early 20th century. We've also pursued a similarly broad range of deliverables: conferences, books, exhibitions, podcasts, documentary films, teaching resources, and digital platforms. Behind this process was a series of collective choices and values worth noting here. At the level of scope and periodization, we made a self-conscious decision not to focus on a single issue, such as slavery or segregation or native land dispossession or urban renewal. Rather, we've tried to build projects across many of these complex issues, both in relation to existing faculty strengths and stated interests from our community partners. Nor have we restricted ourselves to origin stories in a distant past. While it's true we're running innovative projects on U of M's early development, one of which I'll talk about more in a moment, we're doing this across all 3 campuses, and we're thinking about these stories in comparative ways. We've also tried to connect these local stories to much larger national histories and policy debates, and we've tried to focus on the ways in which these histories continue to live and resonate into the present. As Liz explained, we are now at the midway point, and for the IHP in Ann Arbor, our research team spent the first 2 years really focusing on the most urgent research questions, identifying key archives and sources, and doing the actual work in multi-generational research teams. With my last few minutes, I just want to point to a few highlights. In our foundational 1817 project, we've pushed far beyond previous understandings of U of M's massive reliance on Native American land. Many of you will know that the original college founded in Detroit had some connection to Native American displacement and dispossession. Article 16 of that treaty in 1817 called for the cession of sections of land so that some of their children may be educated in the future. Our collaborative research for this project has been pushing well beyond what was previously known. Above all, we know what it means now to say that U of M was founded on and through Native American land. This is a hand-drawn diagram from the U of M trustee records of the original plan to locate the ceded Native American lands from the 1817 treaty. We know precisely where these lands were and how the university built its early wealth through Native American land cessions and flip scripts. These red dots you can see are places where the lands were located and purchased. It happened not just in Detroit or in Ann Arbor. Indeed, much of the wealth accrued by U of M was built by subdividing land tracts and parcels and flipping them for profit across our state. Thanks to the stellar research of our team, we can now show precisely how these early forms of wealth translated into faculty salaries, books, museum collections, and science equipment. But we're not just interested in how the story played out in the 19th century. Indeed, through the origins of the Native American Student Association in 1971 and student activist projects coming out of the American Indian movement, we've seen how these issues continue to reverberate into the present. And through careful diplomacy with the U of M General Counsel's Office, we've gained access to the university legal records on a 1970s lawsuit against the U of M regents for noncompliance with the treaty. I'll just finish up by saying, in 3 weeks, we will be hosting a large national conference in Ann Arbor to showcase this body of work and generate conversation and dialogue with a wide range of stakeholders. The program will include not only academic experts, but a number of universities from universities around the country, but also our own student researchers, and above all, tribal lawyers, elders, educators, and activists talking about the effects of living with treaties in the present. Thank you. I will call my colleague Amin. There's Cam, okay.
Hi, I'm Cam. Good morning. Let's see, are we at? Yeah, good. At UM Dearborn, we spent our first year building an infrastructure to help our students, staff, and faculty combine qualitative and quantitative research methods with improved archival access. This would help them take part fully in the Inclusive History Project's 5-year mission to research, engage, and repair. We originally collected these efforts under the umbrella of something called the 1959 Project Site. Project sites, as you may know, are hubs of 2 to 3 years of activity guided by one or more of the 4 IHP organizing frames that Jay told us about. While project sites will sunset or transform, their deliverables are meant to endure and provide ongoing opportunities for insight into what the university has done well or done poorly in its efforts to realize its core mission of opening up access to knowledge and skills for all. Let me walk you through 4 of our deliverables as we finish up year 3. Sorry, I just have to make sure the slide really moved when I thought it would. The Restored Voices Oral History Project. While new oral history initiatives are a cornerstone of the work happening on my campus, we also have a trove of interviews with UM Dearborn faculty and staff from a legacy oral history project just sitting in our archives and in some cases waiting on servers for proper digital curation. Last summer, we had a soft launch of the Restored Voices Oral History Project database, which is going to make available all of these older interviews so they can be analyzed alongside new ones that we are recording now. But where will all this material live? And that gets me to the next deliverable. Much of it will live on a platform called the Dearborn Campus Memory Collective. This platform is going to house all of the digital deliverables that are emerging from all IHP-funded work on my campus. This means story maps integrated with access to digitized records and other kinds of media. This means peer-reviewed digital exhibits of our research investigations. This means new and growing oral history and memoir databases. The platform will also be one of the access points for many of the newly digitized records that we are working on with Mardigian Library. It is where we're also going to share both the raw data and data visualizations from a survey and focus group initiative called, can I go there yet? Yeah, I can, all right. the survey of travel, mobility, and the campus community. This survey grew out of a set of questions that emerged from an earlier oral history project known as the Michigan Middle East Travelers Oral History Project, or METOP, and yes, I'm responsible for naming it, I'm sorry. We had questions about the impact of regimes of immobility on how people felt about their connection to the Middle East, but also for people of MENA heritage, how they felt about the Dearborn campus. So we developed a survey with my colleagues, you can see in our kind of Brady Bunch shot there, with those questions in mind, and ran that survey in April and May of 2025. There was a robust response rate from students, staff, and faculty, and especially amazing response rate from our alums. And this is important because the alum data gives us layers of historically situated information, reaching back to our campus's early years. We're analyzing the data now and running focus groups and even doing oral histories with some of the survey participants. This semester, in fact, we recorded 8 new oral history interviews in my Liberal Studies 450 class, and these will join the dozens of others being recorded on my campus. We've combined the oral history and survey teams into what we call supergroup, there they are, to develop and analyze these streams of information, but also to think about how to best situate them and represent them on the Dearborn Campus Memory Collective platform. For me, this has been one of the 2 very rewarding collaborative mixed method projects. The next project brought together oral history, art history, and documentary filmmaking. This is our documentary about Chancellor Belinda J. Wilson and artist John Arne Lockhart. The Inclusive Storytelling Hub, which is the brainchild of our Jen Proctor and IHP Dearborn, fielded a documentary project team of 14 people, students, faculty, and staff, for almost exactly 1 year to premiere a 28-minute film on February 11th of this year. The film highlighted a forgotten connection between U of M Ann Arbor and U of M Dearborn, just as it also reckoned with complex legacies of sexism and racism in art and in higher education. Working on this documentary highlighted 2 things for me: the power of pairing collaborative research with creative storytelling, and the way that a very small story can be a portal to a galaxy of information that we can curate and share and bring to bear on many new lines of inquiry. IHP Dearborn is also on the cusp of delivering our first peer-reviewed digital exhibit, authored by IHP Dearborn Research Fellow Dr. Kendra Pilatus, about women and the history of computing on the Dearborn campus. Kendra's 10,000-word analysis is integrated with digitized archival records, historical footage, and a mix of new and restored oral history narratives. I want to briefly revisit the question, or visit the question of repair, by revisiting a warning that was in the documentary we did from Chancellor Wilson. And she sounded this warning in the film and also throughout her career, that we have been, as a society, steadily starving the rest of society of access to higher education, and that the harms of that have not fallen equally. The student share of higher education tuition costs in Michigan, for example, have shifted from 30% in 1980 to 59% in 2024. That's worse than the national average. And since 2004, state appropriation per student for U of M Ann Arbor has decreased from more than 13,000 to just a little bit more than 6,000. UM Dearborn from a little more than 6,000 to almost 5,000. Flint from 7,000 to not quite 5. You know, when I wrote this, I didn't remember there was a slide with all the data right behind me. I could have just looked up there. These are all expressed in $2025 to elicit extra outrage, to bring to your state reps, to bring to your regents, to say, hey, did you co-sign this bad idea? Maybe you could repair it. Noted. When I think of repair, I think of equalizing per student funding on all U of M campuses. And IHP funding has underscored the value of equitable investment. Over the past 3 years, IHP funding has directly enriched the academic life of 144 students on my campus through a combination of coursework, paid internships, research grants, and several of these students have also represented our campus in the Inclusive History Project Student Advisory Board, a paid service opportunity, which is important, to collaborate with counterparts at Flint and Ann Arbor in accordance with the tri-campus ethos of the Inclusive History Project. Now, when that funding ends, if that funding ends, all that enrichment for our students will go away. It wasn't there before, it's there now because of IHP. So let's hope our new university leadership continues to see the value that IHP adds to all of our campus communities. Now, I have one little last bit here. The thank you slide, I know. Is there text for the thank you? There is text for the thank you slide. This time, this is the last time I'm actually going to appear at an IHP Summit as the research director for the Dearborn campus. Next year, I'll be a co-director for my campus, and that is going to be wonderful. The year after that, I'm just going to be another IHP-funded PI, able to work a little more on areas that I'm actually qualified to study, which is great. And what gives me tremendous reassurance about the future of IHP, despite my ominous note earlier, is the team facilitating all this work on my campus, on each of our campuses. And there is one person at all the meetings, getting all the updates, holding up the you have to wrap up sign, that makes everything that IHP does on our campus and throughout possible. And that is our managing director and dear friend, Jenny Brady, who's asking me to finish my remarks, and now I have. That's right. Okay.
So let's start by just lessons learned. So you think back on this first 2.5 years of the IHP, starting with Lisa, the project you thought you were entering and the one you've now encountered and all. I mean, just your own reflections on the lessons learned about trying to undertake something as extensive, but also that has 3 sort of focal points of research, engagement, and repair.
Sure. So one of the things that I've really tried to do on our campus is to engage as many people as possible into the research process, to ensure that research was not just being conducted by tenure track faculty, but really accessible to everyone. And so with the Student Support Services Centers project, we actually have fellows that are all staff people. So these individuals do not work in research in their everyday jobs, but they have important lived experience for talking about the centers that a researcher outside would not have. We hired them, and then we also hired students and some alumni to work as the research assistants. And I thought, oh, this is going to be wonderful. Everybody's going to be a creator of history, and it has been. One of the things that I didn't anticipate, though, is how much kind of infrastructure we would need to build to make this go forward. And so we had to start with basics, like how do you conduct interviews? What are the archives? What do you look for in archives? So there were a lot of kind of developmental trainings that we provided for people that initially I wasn't thinking about, but it's been really great for building skills and honing skills for some people. And now they have more marketable skills. So that was definitely one thing, is just building the structure to support the different programs. We also, on our campus, I think something that's unique is the majority of people that are in charge of IHP projects are not tenure track faculty. And so that has meant for me to really, help and support them in different ways that I can. And sometimes that means, telling them, okay, we have to do the research before we get to the reparative action, because our campus is very action oriented. Let's do it now. And we're like, well, wait. Before we assume what the solutions are, we really have to have a fuller understanding of the problem. So really just kind of building that in, and also working to distinguish the difference between advocacy and research.
Jay?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's really jumped out for me is that I had naively previously imagined that local history or institutional history or public history was something separate from the kinds of national or global histories that most of the faculty in my department in U of M History in Ann Arbor work on. And what I've learned very quickly is that that zero-sum choice is a false choice. It's actually not true at all. And if you look at something like the 1817 project that I was detailing earlier, what you quickly begin to understand is that the local story here about native land dispossession and the creation of the University of Michigan was a kind of blueprint for dispossession and the creation of higher ed more generally in the United States. For example, for the land-grant university system that was created in 1862, U of M's model was then expanded in that federal program. But more generally, what we've been trying to do is really make an affirmative argument that Great Lakes Native American history is at the center of US history more generally. And that's something we hope will now reverberate into social studies curricula in our state, K through 12 teaching across our state. One of the exciting things we're doing at this conference, Living with Treaties, is bringing together tribal educators, elders, and activists together with social studies curriculum designers and K through 12 teachers, so that kids taking AP US history in the state of Michigan don't imagine that Native American history is something that happened in Wyoming or South Dakota or Oklahoma. It was happening here in very profound ways that affect their lives. I mean, the history is with us all the time. The guy who negotiated that treaty in 1817, Lewis Cass, his name is everywhere in our state. Cass County, Cass Boulevard, Cass Tech in Detroit. So I've really become convinced that there are powerful ways to put these local and national histories together. Same thing with the Filipino project I talked about, Reconnect and Recollect. The one other thing I just mentioned that's been very exciting is creating these multi-generational research teams is precisely the kind of thing I think we should be doing more of all the time. It's a really exciting thing to watch PhD students, undergraduates, staff, community partners, and faculty PIs working together on these larger projects. And it's been exciting to also create PI teams, leadership teams that combine academics with other kinds of partners. A tribal archivist from the Little Traverse Band in northern Michigan, or the vice president of educational programs for our University Musical Society for our project on Hill Auditorium.
Yeah.
Lessons learned and relearned. The one lesson I had to learn is that your institutional context in which you're operating is a dynamic, tricky, and contentious one with lots of trust issues that you have to work with and work to overcome to bring people on board. And the kind of work of including people, of recruiting people, of keeping people on task, on mission, if I can put it that way, is, I think, one of those lessons that's every week there is some reminder about that. And with all the wonderful things that you've learned, that is there. So the main lesson is, this is important work. I think it's impactful work, but it's work. And there's no resting on laurels, and the lesson learned is you don't stop until they make you stop. I would sum it up that way. And learn how to use a microphone.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question, but I actually want to make sure if you have a question, you raise your hands, and we will begin to turn to the audience. And so if there's anyone who has a question, we're looking. But in the meantime, there was reference to resources. So when you think about resources, we can think of them as financial resources, human resources, conceptual resources, intellectual resources. How do you think about the IHP and the way those resources have now filtered through your various campuses? Kim, I'll start with you.
Oh, okay. Now that I've learned my microphone stuff. The first thing I realized when Jenny was telling me, well, we have these resources we want to get to your students and to your faculty, is that it was sort of like an IV with all this medicine in it, but I didn't have a vein. So I had to build I realized that there was no staff that could be spared from any part of my campus, so the austerity measures were kind of hitting that way. I realized that what we had to do was really just build that capacity, kind of build the basic equipment. And the thing is, one of our tasks has been to sort of think of the funding from IHP as a sort of proof of concept, an archivist. Digital humanities, Marlene Madrick. The slides, they were good because Marlene made them good, not because I did anything with that. Because those investments are not ones that the institution, at least my institution, automatically, organically thinks we need this. But by sort of showing the effectiveness and how it really adds value to everything the campus does, I think what IHP has done is sort of highlight the notion of, if you invest this way, yes, for this project, but it helps so many other things. And it pushes against, I think, this notion that we should keep trying to do things with less stuff, as opposed to what value can you add for everybody if you add this piece. So that's how maybe think of resources, is to really push the investment issue versus the slash and burn austerity mindset, which is, I want to say, prevalent.
I mean, I think of the IHP as creating kind of connectivity and connective tissues across things that are often siloed or separate. I don't think you can really do these kinds of projects and really understand the footprint of the University of Michigan, its impacts around the state, around the country, around the world, if you don't have this higher altitude ability to create projects that span across departments, schools, colleges, all three campuses, and with a wide range of community partners. So I think IHP Resources has enabled those conditions of possibility to really think about these big questions of impact across the last 200 years. But at the same time, what it has done, I think, is created what I've sometimes thought of as institutional intelligence. I think it's really hard for the university to make good policy decisions and to pursue transformative programs when it doesn't actually know its own history very effectively and doesn't really have that deep, fact-based, rigorous kind of research base on which to make informed decisions. And so I've really felt like part of what the IHP is opening up is not just these fantastic symposia and conferences and podcasts and documentary films and paid research opportunities for students. It's also facilitating, I hope, a kind of broader institutional intelligence where we all understand more about how we got here, how this university came to exist, what it has done well or poorly over the last 200 years, and hopefully make smarter decisions moving forward about its impacts in the world.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Lisa.
Just to add to that, I mean, I completely agree with both Cam and Jay. The support has been tremendous. You know, we now have, our archivist was able to, you know, recategorize their title because now they're a supervisor. We hired an assistant archivist. More people actually know where the archives are and are using the archives. We're kind of in a weird kind of situation. Most people just walk past it, including myself. The first time I went there, I was like, oh, that's where it is. So I've been really happy to learn about how much traffic that's going in there now, and people really understanding, like, what are the archives, and oh, how is this, you know, perhaps related to something that I'm interested in studying. But I think, you know, with the SSSC project, one of the things of not only, you know, tying the history to local and national histories, it's also highlighted who the different players are, the formal and informal leaders. And I really hope that by doing this work, we foster a sense of agency in all types of people, you know, especially students, so that in learning their history, they realize that they are not just passive individuals on the campus, but they have been responsible for significant institutional change. And that comes with allyship with things like faculty and staff and leadership that's been able to champion them. But for me, it's really important to understand, like, what are those mechanisms that have worked in the past, those levers of change that we can continue to pull on so that we can, build a brighter future, a better university, and provide templates for others to do this work.
Great. Thank you. So who has a question?
Thank you very much for all of that. So one thing I'm really curious about is the way that you are navigating these dynamic contexts. And Jay, you used this term, careful diplomacy, and I wrote a note like, how? What are these kinds of things that you have to do that maybe there's a moment that you had to navigate that was using careful diplomacy, and I'd be very curious what that looks like for each of you, because I'm sure that you're doing it more than just once.
I mean, I guess I'll just say quickly, working with the Office of General Counsel, that's tricky. For us, these are archival records that are important to tell the story. For the university, they're potential questions of liability, right, and lawsuits. So these are not decisions that are easily made or just sweeping, across the board decisions. But another way in which the IHP's resources have created connectivity that matters, I think, is that the connections we've made between the scholars working on these issues, the community partners who, are stakeholders in these histories, the repositories, the Bentley Library, where a lot of these records are held. It creates the kind of coalition of stakeholders who can make the case for why it's important to release these OGC records. And I've simultaneously served on the executive board for the Bentley Historical Library, which has the president and the provost on it. And so it allows the opportunity to make that case and kind of alleviate fears, about downstream consequences of opening up these archives and pursuing this kind of research. It was a big win for us to have access to those records on the lawsuit in 1971 for non-compliance on the original treaty.
I know we've been asked, or at least I've been asked more than once, what history are you telling? What, basically, what is your agenda? What agenda are you pushing? And my answer has been the inclusion of an inclusive history. And we really are open to all different types of projects, and really being transparent in our methodology. So, as I'm learning, the history is never quite fully written. There's always things that come up that somebody found or somebody's memory. And so to kind of prepare for the challenges, the best that we can do is just be very transparent about who we spoke to, how we gathered the data, what are those limitations, and if there is a different perspective or different data that we didn't consider, we'd love to know about it. And so, again, I think the agenda for us is really just to have more voices around the table, and not any particular political or ideological perspective, per se.
That's working.
Well, I'll just say that one must sacrifice public candor when talking about diplomacy. I will say that, broadly speaking, the work that I would call the diplomatic work of what I do is mostly about reassuring people who are, for various reasons, in a defensive crouch. We live in authoritarian times. We live with a leadership that doesn't know how to handle that all the time. We have financial strains, and so everything potentially looks to some people that it's going to blow up their universe or embarrass them or something. There's always, that's what they're worried about at some level, or that they'll get started and have the rug pulled out from under them, if you think about the other side of it. And so a lot of it is quieting the part of your brain that wants you to tell them to stop doing that, but focusing on what's the solution I can offer these folks that I can say and not feel like I'm compromising what I think the project's about, that they can see their interest in, and helping that move forward. And I think some version of that happens in big and small ways every day.
We hopefully have whetted your appetite for additional conversation. The question of whose history, whose university is fundamental to the work we're doing at the IHP. And that goes back to even as we were formulating this project, we announced it as a presidential initiative, but with independence from the president's office. And so we go back to diplomacy, and the question that was posed even there was sort of a diplomatic framing at the very outset about where we come with the imprimatur of the president's office, but we have the freedom to do things that may not be first approved by the president's office. And so with that, we come back to whose history and whose university, and we seek to engage in our three principles of research, engagement, and repair. I want to thank you for being part of this first session, and we're going to transition and then take a little break and come back.